Good morning and welcome to this breakout session on multimodal transportation, planes, trains, and roads, or if anyone is a fan of the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. So I rewatched that the other day, it's great. Everyone likes to think their panel is the most important, but I do think that we are one of the most important panels at this session or at this conference because I think all of us can understand the importance of logistics. And in the case of Ukraine, how important that is in terms of exports, but also to be able to ship things in, out, economic development, and of course, helping the war effort. So, costs of war. There comes opportunities, and here we have an opportunity to modernize Ukraine's transportation and logistics sector with state-of-the-art infrastructure. And that's why you're all gathered here and why we have this great panel with us. Sea and land transport routes, which are the primary methods for exporting agricultural products, particularly grain, are under threat. And we need to modernize a strategy for its transportation and logistics infrastructure that is multimodal for Ukraine. The country needs to identify short and long-term alternatives to rail and port infrastructure, including routes to Poland, Romania, and the Danube. Developing and implementing a comprehensive logistics and transportation reconstruction plan is going to be crucial to Ukraine's recovery, but in multiple ways, not just for its infrastructure, but for also providing good jobs for millions of Ukrainians. Ukraine will be better positioned to export agricultural and manufacturing products once we have this modernized state-of-the-art infrastructure. So this panel will examine what can be accomplished in the short term versus the long term, including efforts currently underway in Ukraine and the damage done to transportation infrastructure. They will also talk about issues that maybe we don't always think about when it comes to building an infrastructure strategy. Standards, what standards are we going to use? And I'm not just talking about high quality ESG, but what sorts of gauges are we going to use on a railway network? So I will introduce our panelists. And again, we have a really great group of folks here. And I realized I didn't introduce myself. I was just so excited to jump into this. My name is Erin Murphy. I'm here with the CSIS, and I'm the senior fellow with the Asia program. Previously, I was with the economics program, so I sort of know what I'm talking about here. I am joined by Matt London, who's the director of government affairs from Amstead Rail. Matt London is with Amstead Rail, which is a Chicago-based 100-year-old manufacturer of running gear for rail rolling stock. He focuses on government advocacy and business association engagement to advance Amstead Rail's business in Ukraine. From 1998 to 2003, he was a desk officer at the U.S. Department of Commerce for Russia and the independent states. He's a graduate of Bowdoin College and has an MA from Georgetown. I'm also joined by Alexander Viner, who's a co-owner of Agrosem LLC. He was born in Ukraine and relocated to Moldova after 1997. And as an economist, I'm very excited to say that he received his MS in economics in 2001. He is an entrepreneur, having co-founded and run multiple businesses, including in agriculture. In 2003, he took on the role of vice president at the UNESCO group of companies based in Ukraine. He was also the CFO of Green Hills Market in Moldova, the largest local chain of grocery stores. He also returned to Ukraine in 2007, where he co-founded the company that he works at today, which is a thriving agricultural enterprise and now a well-known agricultural distribution company among the top 5 in Ukraine. Agrosem is the largest John Deere dealer in Ukraine as of 2022, and the largest distributor in the Ukraine of several companies that are probably known to you all, including Yara, Corteva, Lindsay, and KWS. Next, we have Eric Churchill from UPS. He's a vice president for global public affairs and sustainability. He has over 18 years of experience in international trade and economics policy advocacy. He's based here in DC, and he leads UPS's government relations for Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and India, so a very small portfolio there, Eric. Prior to joining UPS, Eric was an advisor on trade strategy at the World Bank and public affairs officer at the International Monetary Fund. He has spent his career based in France, Tunisia, the Philippines, and DC, probably the hardest post he has. And finally, and not last but least, No, not least, but last. Sorry, Emily Grind. She's the Director of Air Freight and Ukraine Development and Reconstruction with Logistics Plus. She's a seasoned professional in international logistics with a diverse background and significant experience. She currently serves, as I mentioned, with Logistics Plus, and it's a position that she just assumed in July of 2023. Prior to that, she served as the International Manager for Air Freight since 2019. Emily's journey with Logistics Plus began in 2013 when she joined as an export specialist. And before her tenure with Logistics Plus, she gained experience in the financial sector at PNC from 2012 to 2013. She holds a BA in International Relations and International Business from Kent State University. Thank you all for joining us today. So to begin our panel, I would like to turn to Matt London for comments.
Great. Thank you, Erin. Good morning. Happy to be here representing, as Erin said, Amstead Rail. And what I thought I'd do is, the first comment I want to make is to acknowledge the heroic role that Ukrainian Railways, UZEP, has played in the war. The reason I want to do that in part is because later on I will be offering some suggestions, as Erin says, of needs to modernize and become even more efficient and productive. But our press has certainly run many stories over the last year and a half, unfortunately, of course, given the circumstances, about what Ukrainian Railways has been able to do. So I want that on the record. Let me do this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Amstead Rail, what we have done, are doing, and want to do in Ukraine, and particularly on the third part of what we want to do in Ukraine, what that might mean and what it's going to frankly require for us to invest. So as Erin said, we're a 100-year-old Chicago-based company. I like using my prop, which is we're the running gear. We make what we call trucks and coupler systems, all of these components, wheels, bearings, axles, castings, and we are the largest player, certainly in North America, on the freight side. This is not a discussion about passenger rail. So we're on the freight side. And what's interesting about this rail car, which is from my childhood, probably 40, 50 years old, looks very much like a rail car today, both here in North America, but also even more like what we see in Ukraine. And that speaks to the fact that railroads are conservative organizations. Here, there, everywhere. That said, I think it is fair to say that the U.S. has moved forward in the last 50 years. And we do run, and this is not widely advertised, the U.S. has the largest freight railroad system in the world. Most productive, we're carrying the most. The industry gets some bad press when they have these accidents, but the fact is it's hugely important to our economy. And as we turn to look at Ukraine, it's even more important to the Ukrainian economy in terms of what and how much it carries on the system. So in looking at Ukraine, that's a top 10 railroad in the world, freight railroad, in terms of metrics that we care about, which are freight rail cars. Now again, order of magnitude, if the U.S. has 1 to really 1.5 million cars here in North America, let's say, Ukraine is going to be anywhere from 100 to 200,000. But that still puts you in fairly rarefied air on the freight side. And what's interesting as well is that while, yes, it's a different gauge than here, 1435, of course, standard gauge here and in Europe, whereas 1520 millimeter was a former Soviet gauge. The fact is their operating system and equipment looks a lot more like North American on the freight side than it looks like Europe. And we have always felt, therefore, that the U.S., at least on things like rolling stock and other matters, is the more natural partner for Ukraine. again, on the freight side than certainly Europe. Now, the Chinese, we all understand, are going to try to get everywhere. Their system, in some ways, is taken from our system, but we'll return to that. What do we have in Ukraine? We have a small joint venture in Malin that makes retrofit packages for these trucks that make them more efficient, which in railroading typically means slightly higher speeds, but also less wheel wear and less need to be shopped or put in for maintenance, which is not what you want. You want your rail car being used to haul the grain to the ports or wherever it might be going, or the iron ore or the metal products, and someday in greater numbers like we do here, intermodal. We have also supplied in components. About 10, 12 years ago, there was a boom in the CIS region for rail car building, and we were able to sell in massive metal castings, which you would think is impossible from our foundry in Granite City, Illinois. About 6,000 cars, that's over a couple of years. We've also had a few other components, which I'll mention later, mostly on a pilot basis. But if I'm honest, I would say that our results have probably not matched our efforts if we look at the last 20 years. And in 2020-21, we were out of Ukraine. Forget it. Just our senior leadership had enough of the stories of what we were going to be able to do, and we closed our Kiev office. But thanks to somebody that I know, some of you in this room know, Eric Luman, who had been in Kiev for us for 15 years, we are now back, and back in a big way. We've rehired people on the ground. Eric is, while now based in Chicago, is over in Ukraine pretty much quarterly, was there for most of July and August, and we really want to make a major push now with the full support of our president and senior management. So that's the good news. What are we doing? We're trying to get individual components certified and approved. And we will want to do that with production here in the U.S. that we would ship over using my colleague here on the panel's firm to get it over to Ukraine. And then, of course, if I'll address what we're looking at. There's Morgan, he knows us well, my colleague Eric. So right now our strategy is to get components approved and into the market and into the system. Now, what are we looking at? What are the challenges for us in going forward and really becoming a major player and wanting to invest? Well, we heard from Aaron standards. Technical standards, frankly, are Soviet in Ukraine today. They're the old GOST rewritten standards. This is really holding back Ukraine in the short term. Again, I go back to my original comment. The railroad performed heroically in the war, but the fact is the technical standards prevent, in our view, the ability to modernize, become more efficient, carry more, be less maintenance costs. And this is what we all want. We want to see a more efficient railroad. So these technical standards need somehow to be rationalized. It may take some time. Some countries, quite frankly, adopt what in the freight side is considered the gold standard, which is the Association of American Railroads, AAR. Even with a different gauge, there's so much that could be taken. We would not be a huge proponent of, again, the freight side of Ukraine adopting the UIC, the European standards for freight rail, because we think they also overdo it. There's some non-rational things in their system. I'm not saying our AAR system is perfect, but it is considered by most a gold standard. So they've got, in our judgment, to do something with these standards, to loosen it up, to be able to push forward with new products, new technologies. For example, I mean, even something, critically important that the big bad player to the east has done has gone up to 25 metric tons per axle, whereas Ukraine is stuck in the old Soviet 23.5, and I will make an advertisement as part of our exit from Russia. We were able to claw back our truck technology, 25-ton technology for the 15-20 meter gauge, and we are going to look forward to re-engage Ukraine with what we call our motion control truck for 25-ton service. The next thing that we have to see in order, I think, to be successful is for some recognition in decision-making about life cycle costs of products. Without that being taken into consideration, it's going to be hard for us to compete. Eric was just over with two of our colleagues at a teardown, i.e. looking at product that we had put in the market 16 years ago. 16 years ago. It essentially looked as new, and we said, you guys can keep running. Whereas the local product has to be reconditioned or replaced every 4 years as a rule. This is our bearing product. So we're hoping that when UZ and private players and private car owners make decisions about what kind of rolling stock and what kind of components, that they will add this critical calculation to decisions on procurement. And then finally, Ukraine has also been railroading for 150 years. There's some serious railway supply companies known here in the U.S. that have historically supplied into our market, global names. But the fact is that we have full respect for them. We view them as partners, and we are prepared to view them also as competitors. We view them as competitors globally. But in Ukraine, the fact is a few of these are, because of the old Soviet system, essentially monopolists. And we've got no problem with strong market shares. We like to have that in our domestic market, and we're good at protecting that. We respect them for wanting to do what they can. But a little competition never hurt anyone. And we're hoping that Ukraine and even these companies that may not want to see Amstead in the market just understand that it's good for everybody. No one's coming in. We know who we're going up against. We don't have any expectations to sort of take the lion's share, but we do need to be let in if we're going to then look at investments. So we're excited about Ukraine, very excited, and we do need to see some things happen. We're working hard day in, day out to make it happen, and we're extremely hopeful, so I'll end it there.
Good. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yep.
Alexander, I'm going to turn to you, and we have a presentation that will accompany your remarks.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you for introducing me, and I have a short presentation about our company, so what we do, who we are, and why we are here today. The car company is AgroSem. We started the company in 2007. There were just 3 of us, me, my partner, and our accountant. And now we are in top 5 agrarian distributors in Ukraine. Actually, we are number 4. And the year turnover is 350 about 300 million euro per year. Our key directions where we work, so we supply Ukrainian farmers with fertilizers, crop protection products, seeds, agriculture machinery, precision farming, because now agriculture is mostly about digital technology than about mechanical stuff. And we are in grain trading as well. Our main brands, we represent a lot of well-known international company in Ukraine. We are a John Deere dealer. Everybody knows green tractors and combine, the best US-made agriculture equipment. And then another few brands, including Yara, Norway, fertilizers producers, Lindsay and Corteva. There are also American companies, FMC, and there are a lot of European companies in our portfolio as well. So our representative offices, we cover the whole countries. The whole country, we have representatives, salesmen in each region. With seeds, fertilizer, crop protection products, we cover the whole country, but with agriculture equipment, we concentrated mostly in western part of the Ukraine. And you're wondering probably why I'm here at transportation panel and not at agriculture panel, which took place before this one. So here's the answer. If you see the red circle close to Poland, the letters is pretty small there, you cannot read, but the name is Most Logistic Terminal, and Logistic Terminal is the answer why I'm here at this transportation panel. So in 2018, trying to solve our own problem of fertilizers import to Ukraine, because we a big importer, and when you deal with a big quantity, trucks, it is not the answer, is not the decision. You cannot deal with thousands of trucks to deliver fertilizers to Ukraine. The natural way to deliver fertilizers to country is either by vessels or by rail, but the rail is another issue. Matt already mentioned that we have different rail gauge with Europe, and this different system not allowed us to move goods directly from Ukraine to European country or backwards. So we were looking for some decision how to handle and how to solve this issue, and we found a piece of land at the border with Poland, just 4 miles from the border with Poland, from Ukrainian side, where at the first rail station we have Ukrainian rail track, rail gauge, and then we have European rail gauge. The track comes a bit inside the territory of Ukraine, like maybe 10 miles. So we bought that piece of land. It was a green field, and we put Ukrainian and European tracks to our territory, and we started with reloading of fertilizers. But then we found out that we are not the only one who face the same issue. So all companies who move goods in big quantities through the border, they face the same issue, and we started developing our terminal and offer this service to the market. And our terminal now, so we connect Ukraine and Europe. Our terminal now contains of grain terminal, containers terminal, warehouses, infrastructure. We have space for bulk goods as well. So the total territory is about 30 acres. I did some math to recalculate everything from hectares and kilometers to miles. As Erin mentioned, I have economic background, so I'm good in math. We have 2.2 miles of tracks on our territory, including European gauge and Ukrainian gauge, and we can put about 100 wagons at the same time at our terminal, including European wagons and Ukrainian wagons. And our grain terminal. We have small storage capacity because it's mostly about transshipment and not about storing grain. So we should work fast with unloading and loading European wagons. So we have 12.5 thousand tons of storage grain capacity. And from our terminal, we have a great connection to trans-European system, rail system. We can go whatever we need, each European port, any clients, whole Europe. Either we need to go to south, to Italy, Croatia, or we have to go to north to Polish ports, or Germany, or even further to the Netherlands or Belgium. And before the war, we increased our transshipping capacity organically. So every year we had some new clients, we started work with some new product, but then the war came February 24th, 2022 last year, and it changed our business approach. Unfortunately, we faced with this full-scale war, and everything had changed. So we implemented three key elements. It was grain trading, most logistic terminal, our terminal, and then we built new logistic chain, because everybody knows that all Ukrainian ports were blocked since the beginning of the war. And Ukrainian ports was the natural way for export, not only for Ukrainian grain, but also for metal, for steel, and many different stuff. And also the natural way for import to Ukraine. If we talk about grain, because grain is the top priority now, before the war, you can see that from 94 to 96% of Ukrainian grain were exported via Black Sea ports, and only pretty small amount were exported by rail or by trucks. And the same situation even worse with vegetable oils. So there is no alternatives to Ukrainian Black Sea ports, but nevertheless, as we were connected to our clients, to farmers, and we supply about 3,000 Ukrainian agriculture producers with all the inputs from our portfolio, and we decided that we should step in and help our clients to export their grain, to keep them alive, to help them, to help the country, and to help our company to survive as well. And we started to utilize our previous experience in fertilizer transportation, in dealing with European rail companies, not to bring fertilizers or other products to Ukraine, but to send European grain by rail to European countries or European ports. And during the first marketing year, and trading companies, they have pretty weird marketing year from July to June. So first marketing year, we exported 300,000 tons of Ukrainian grain, either to European ports or to European final customers. And please keep in mind that we've never been involved in grain trading before the war, so that was our debut, and it was pretty hard, but I think we did pretty well. And our goal to increase this direction, and our goal is 1 million tons of Ukrainian grain exported to European countries or to further customers, further regions. So this is our geography. We delivered Ukrainian grain to Croatia, Italy, Austria, Germany, to Great Britain, to Poland, or mostly through Poland, and with our Polish partner, we delivered grain to the Netherlands and Belgium, mostly by rail, which is a new supply chain. So the natural way for grain, even if we think about the Netherlands, they were a big importer of Ukrainian grain, but never by rail, by vessels. So we made a new supply chain and deliver grain there by rail. And then we did few vessels, few from Danube River ports to Croatia by Danube River, and to Sicily, Italy, by sea, and also to the United Kingdom. And now we are delivering already rapeseeds to Germany by vessels from Polish ports. Okay, this is the terminal. So as I said, we had no grain terminal at our most logistic terminal before the war, and in May we decided to start construction. We received all the permission pretty fast, and I want to thank Ukrainian authorities. They totally understood that this is the key point, and this is the only way to accelerate Ukrainian grain export. So they did their bureaucracy pretty fast, and last year in November the terminal was fully operated. The grain terminal is still under construction. We are adding more storage capacity there, but since last November we are fully operated. We loaded European trains with Ukrainian grain. And as I said, like, western borders became a strategic direction due to blockage of the Ukrainian Black Sea ports, and we received a lot of different requests to reload different type of goods. There are a few of them, like steel, kaolin, wire, oil, of course fertilizers. We did sugar, grain, then it was even household appliances. I remember at the very beginning of the war, it was probably first or second week, forwarding company which we deal with before the war, they just called us and asked, do you have some space for refrigerators? We said, refrigerators? What? We don't have equipment to unload it. But then, okay, just send it there. We will handle it. And the same situation was ferronickel. We've never heard what is that, how they packed, what to do with that. But we tried to help and to handle it. And then it was containers and humanitarian aid, a lot of different stuff. Then, of course, it was everything new, not only to us, but for the whole industry. And from the very beginning, we tried to send Ukrainian grain abroad, no matter the cost. But you cannot deal with this kind of approach, so you have go back to economy, to calculate it, to make it more efficient. And trying to make it more efficient, we start working with some solutions. So what we can bring back from European ports, so what goods we can bring back. And of course, if we are talking about hoppers, this is the special wagons for grain transportation. We have nothing to put back. But then we start dealing with wagons, the same like Matt have here, like open top. It was pretty weird, even from us, like how to transport grain in open top wagons. So how to prevent them from natural damage like rain or snow. And we start looking around and see, okay, so when you deliver grain by trucks, you have some cover there, tent, and you have no issue with quality, you have no issue with rain. So let's do bigger tent and cover that wagons. And it's not only because we are trying to find the way what to bring back. And of course, as I said, there is no way to put something to hoppers, but there are a lot of different goods that you can put to open-top wagons on their way back. But also there are a huge lack of hoppers, especially from European side. They work absolutely different. So they have smaller distance, they have smaller farmers, and they deliver grain mostly by trucks, not by rail. So there was a huge, and there is still a huge lack of hoppers from European side. So that also was a decision how to deliver grain. And because we were involved in fertilizers import, so we sent that open-top wagons with Ukrainian grain to Polish ports, and then we brought fertilizers, packed fertilizers in bay bags on their way back. Now we are trying to find what we can bring back from port of Rotterdam, which is far from Ukraine, but we also deliver grain there by open-top wagons. And Rotterdam is a huge hub, so there are a lot of different goods that could be delivered to Ukraine. And we have already wagons there, so we are open to any kind of ideas. And to be secure with possibility of grain delivery and to have possibility to secure our permanent flow of wagons, we even rented wagons from European side and from Ukrainian side. So we are now pretty deep in logistic. And this is about logistic during the war, but we also should think about after-war logistic and we have to start preparing for that now, but not only after the war. And the key point of after-war logistic is reconstruction and renovation of Ukraine. And we see a lot of panelists during these 2 days, and everybody was sharing their thoughts and ideas about renovation. And of course, not about rebuilding, but renovation. This is the right word. Because if we have a lot of damage in Ukraine, and infrastructure is the big part of that damage, but we don't have to rebuild what we had before the war, but we have to think few steps ahead and build something new which will be useful in the next coming decades. And the next key point is integration into the European Union. And it's not only about being a part or entering the European Union. We all see that this is our new market. So we cannot go to Russia or to the East anymore. This is our enemy, and all our future is with Europe. So that will establish new routes for many different goods. And going back to reconstruction, it means a lot of technology, a lot of equipment, a lot of building materials that should be produced in Ukraine or should be imported to Ukraine. And this is also will be the big part of the future logistic. And of course, it will be a boost in production of different products for domestic market in Ukraine and also for exporting for foreign markets. And cross-border cooperation will be a big part of after-war integration and renovation of Ukraine. I think there is a good opportunity for not only for the US companies, but mostly for European companies to cooperate with Ukraine, not to resist, because anyway, our Ukrainian future is with Europe, and this is the huge opportunity for European companies, for European private sector to cooperate to Ukraine, to use Ukrainian human capital, to use Ukrainian resources, to use knowledge that we have in Ukraine to rebuild Ukraine and to receive benefits from that. And few words about financing. It's also a part of not only of Ukraine after the war, but even during the war. So we are one of example of financing during the war. So we received loan from EBRD, European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, 9.6 million euro for extending our terminal. And together with the loan, we received 1.5 million euro from the US government. I want to say thank you to the US government and to the US taxpayers, because it's your money. That money will be invested during this and next year to extend our terminal. So we will extend our storage capacity up to 22,000 tons, and it will help us to reload 5,100 tons of grain per year. Then we will invest in expansion of rail infrastructure, which we should extend rail tracks, which we have at our territory, at our terminal. And container terminal extending is also the part of this investment program, because containerization is also the future of Ukrainian logistics. Now we have pretty little percentage, about 5 or 6%, compared to 40% or 45% with other countries, European countries and the US as well. We bought 2 locomotives, shunting locomotives, to be absolutely independent from Ukrzaliznytsia with shunting things, because it's also the big part of the efficiency. And here's the general plan how the terminal should looks like after the project will be completed. So we have warehouses, we have grain terminal, we have territory for containers or for bulk cargo, and of course we have pretty long rail tracks there. And thank you, together to the victory and reconstruction of the country.
Thank you so much, Alexander. Okay, and for folks in the back, we do have some seats up here in the front, and you'll be in our direct line of sight, so we'd be happy to have you here and also in the middle, so please feel free. Eric, I'm going to turn over to you for comments.
Sure. Maybe just to give some background on UPS, I think it's probably a pretty familiar name to most people here, but we're a 100-year-old company based in Atlanta, Georgia. We had $100 billion in turnover last year. We're one of the largest integrated logistics providers in the world. We operate in over 200 countries, and we have over 500,000 employees. I wanted to focus my comments today on kind of how UPS looks at a country like Ukraine. And I think that we look at this through the lens of global value chains. We run one of the largest air networks in the world, which is really at the core of our logistics network. And that work is based on the idea that our customers need certainty, predictability, and timeliness in the delivery of their products. And where we operate is really, and where the core of our business is in the kind of countries that Ukraine wants to emulate. Countries that are very much integrated into European and American global value chains. So how do we look at Ukraine right now? I think on the positive side, we see immense opportunity just in proximity. Proximity to the largest consumer market in the world. The workforce is amazing. I think in 5 years' time, we're going to have the best logistics workers in the world are all going to be coming from Ukraine based on the experience that they're getting on the battlefield. And an industrial base which predates Soviet times and is incredibly complex in terms of the range of industrial supplies and transformation of materials, integration into different kinds of value chains. That's all on the plus side. But the reality is that up until the war, Ukraine was not a major player in sophisticated global value chains. So in our network, we think about the integrated circuits, the complex pharmaceuticals, cold chain supply, these kinds of products, right? So if Ukraine wanted to get there, it would struggle, and it did struggle, because the border processes were incredibly slow. They were unpredictable. There was corruption. Even basic, implementation of things like the trade facilitation agreement, for example, was uncertain depending on the day, right, and the people that you would encounter. So I think as we look to the future and what Ukraine can do to integrate into those networks, a lot of it will be on that processing side, on just simply ensuring that the borders work really well, right? And I think that's not the biggest lift that Ukraine has. I think that's something that can be done. But what it will take is a vision by the government, and I think it's shown that it has this through accession to the European Union, a vision that it wants to have the same standards that its closest neighbors have. As was just mentioned, the cross-border cooperation, right, which will be absolutely fundamental because Ukraine's integration into supply chain starts with Poland, it starts with Romania, and the near neighbors around that, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and then into Germany. But it will take. So I think on the customs side, there are some low-hanging fruits, but I think one of the things that would, if I were advising the government on an export strategy, I would say is that I think that concentrating on some of the elements that have already been mentioned here today is that taking a global integration strategy solves a lot of the problems that we're likely to see in the coming months and years in Ukraine. Balance of payments problems are going to be, right now we have a huge percentage of the budget that is dependent on foreign aid that is inherently somewhat unpredictable. Exports helps to solve that, right? Just through getting dollars and euros back into the economy. It helps with donor support, frankly. We've heard tremendous support from USAID here, EBRD, the EIB, the IFC, et cetera. But we all know that that's inherently somewhat fragile. And I think the more that Ukraine leans into exports, the more that it will be able to garner goodwill among donors and continue to get that political support in capitals like Washington. But perhaps most importantly is that I think it helps solve some of the governance problems. So I think the problem in customs and in border processes that we face and that any importer into Ukraine has is based on this idea that there is something that is zero sum about crossing borders. And I think for a lot of places that are not integrated into value chains, it is zero sum. Frankly, if the agent doesn't get a kickback, somebody else will. But trade expands the pie. Trade it gives space for the governance reforms to take place, to build the kind of political capital that is needed within agencies, within ministries, so that those reforms don't become zero sum, but become something that is actually a key to professionalizing those border services so that you're bringing populations and people who might otherwise feel threatened by reform along with you as you transform the economy. So I'll stop there, but that's, I think, my case for Ukrainian integration into the global economy.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, Emily, over to you.
Yeah. So I'm Emily Grind. I'm with Logistics Plus. We are an American-based transportation, supply chain, and business intelligence company who do a lot of work in Ukraine. We have 4 offices over there right now and 70 people on the ground who will help facilitate our day-to-day operations and keep the freight moving. Our portfolio there spans anywhere from government goods to humanitarian aid, project cargo, and general cargo. Right now, we are the largest logistics provider in the oil and gas sector. We're moving about 40,000 metric tons of pipe through the Black Sea right now. So we feel the pain that some of the ag sector has touched on earlier with how hard it is to get in and out and unstable. But our team has been working there to try to find alternate solutions so that the product can keep moving and make the deadlines that the customers have. We also have been working under certain humanitarian organizations providing aid on our own as well as in partner with them. Been sending outfitting ambulances to the war-torn areas, and we've also been helping with providing the Ukrainian armed forces with goods that they need to continue on with the fighting in the war. The one thing we really wanted to touch on and bring up to the point is that it doesn't really seem as if there's going to be this big portion where there's going to be a war phase and a reconstruction phase. We really need to start putting the roadmaps out now to be able to allow the reconstruction phase to begin. The security in the country is not uniform. Obviously, the West is more secure than the East, and in some parts of the West, you would even say that they're some of the safest places on Earth with all of the different missile systems and everything that are in place. And we just really would like to be able to help U.S. companies and Western companies penetrate the Ukrainian market and allow them to help the Ukrainian companies operate in a way that is clear and not corrupt. And with that, we would love to see the help of the U.S. government, European government, as well as other key players like the UK and Japan, start the conversation of how do we start this preliminary roadmap of securing borders, having infrastructure in place for when the reconstruction begins, and just really bringing that up to play. As everyone knows, railways aren't laid overnight. Infrastructure isn't made overnight. We really need to start having things in place that allow for warehousing facilities to be made. Having people come in that are going to help with the reconstruction and the infrastructure. Also having the electrical grids put in place. And again, just making sure that when we're rebuilding, when we're ready to start rebuilding, that everything is already there so that it can run smoothly and as effectively as needed.
That's great, and thank you all for your comments here. Now we're going to move into the Q&A part where I'm going to take my privilege and start asking questions. But Emily, I'm actually going to start with you. First of all, I agree with what everyone has said, and previously I worked for the Development Finance Corporation, so it is a lot in terms of focusing on infrastructure and making it work. We have active conflict now happening in Ukraine. We don't know how long this is going to go on, how much damage there's going to be. As a logistics company, you talk about roadmaps. What are the types of priorities we should think about in terms of how to phase in this type of work and this infrastructure? What are your recommendations?
I think the first thing we need is a better insurance plan. I know that's been a hot topic over the course of the past 2 days, but in the U.S. every day we insure buildings and different properties that have high risk for hurricanes, for fires, for flooding. And like I said earlier, there are safer areas of Ukraine where we're able to send goods over and it's not as risky as the other portion. But so I feel that a lot of companies would feel more comfortable sending their goods over if they knew that they could be backed by an insurance. And also saying that, kind of going hand in hand, I also believe that we need some sort of receivable insurance available. That might be the government of Ukraine backing letters of credit, using foreign banks for the receivables once the goods are received, but having some sort of insurance there that payment will be received. For us, we really see a need for people to start mapping out the western border crossing points. We think those are going to be key to getting not only materials in when the reconstruction starts, but also they're going to be, a bigger player in Ukraine than they were previously. We understand that the Black Sea situation is not sustainable. Obviously, it's not something that can continue on the way it has been. But for now, it's kind of a contested area. And we really need to see the infrastructure being built up in the West, the bridges being rebuilt, making sure they can handle all of this increased traffic that is now coming through, and then will continue to come through. The hope is that the Danube and the Black Sea will be protected by, maybe Patriot systems in the future, but that is just not what's realistic right now. The goods need to keep flowing and keep moving both in and out. And for that, we really just want to see, EU and Ukraine participation on the western borders, again, to make sure that everything is continuing to ramp up and that will allow goods to freely flow.
Excellent, thank you for that. In a similar theme, Eric, I'm going to turn to you. You talk about what a company is looking at in the country, what you need in terms of governance, anti-corruption. There is work being done by U.S. agencies on that to try to help with the governance standards. There's the launch of the G7 Ukraine Invest platform. There's also, I think, efforts underway by the Ukraine government as well. But what mechanisms do you think are in place to help build confidence for investors going in for the outside? I think Emily here pointed out some great work that's being happening or suggestions to help de-risk some investments going in. But is there anything that you're seeing now or major gaps that you think need to be filled?
I don't know if it's a gap so much, but I think one of the things that we need to continue to see is the country ownership. I think that the outpouring of donor support for Ukraine is laudable, of course, completely necessary, but it is insufficient and in some ways risky when it comes to actually getting Ukraine's economy back up to speed. And you've worked in development finance. My background is at the World Bank and the IMF. And, there are a lot of people on the payroll right now at these organizations who can, have a lot of good ideas, right? But being selective about those ideas, focusing on the areas that is Ukraine being selective about those ideas, focusing on the cities, the industrial clusters, the corridors, the border points that are absolutely essential for their plan. I think that is what will bring a lot of confidence into the process. And I think it will also help focus. I mean, we shouldn't forget, at least in the World Bank or the EBRD, Ukraine is the shareholder. It is the owner, right? It doesn't take direction from the World Bank. It should be directing the World Bank to what its program needs to be. And they have the World Bank has all of the experts in the world to help on those, but it should own those projects and make sure that it is only investing in the projects that it needs in order to get its economy back on its feet.
Great, thank you. Alexander, I'm going to turn to you. I haven't forgotten you, Matt, don't worry. But as essentially a local company, what support do local businesses need, both from the international community, and what kind of support are you getting from the government of Ukraine, and what else would you like to see? I mean, given the circumstances.
Dealing with authorities, it's also always a challenge, not only in Ukraine, but all over the world, because they have strict rules, and their responsibility is to think about safety, about about putting rules, equal possibilities for everybody. But what I want to mention that during the war, we saw absolutely fantastic support from the government side. It's unbelievable. So there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of areas where they should put their effort and to improve it, to make it more, to modernize the system, legislation, to put it closer to the European standards, because we think about entering European Union. But also I would mention that we feel that support, and when it came to the issues which need immediate reaction, they are really supportive now. And like before the war, let's say it was now possibility to talk directly to the ministers. But if we will talk about ban from Poland and all other neighboring countries, this year in April, there was direct connection to the Minister of Agriculture, who immediately went to Poland, start negotiating with Polish minister about transit, not about import. Okay, that they're will to stop Ukrainian grain import, but let's talk about transit. And ministry put immediately a WhatsApp group where many participants can address directly their questions to the ministry, and he respond immediately. So it was fantastic. We had an example. We delivered grain to the small ports of Poland. The name is Kolobrzeg. Nobody knows where is that port at the map. And when Ukrainian and Polish ministries agreed the list of the ports which Ukrainian grain allowed to go, Kolobrzeg wasn't at that list. So we came in with the question, and next day we received a call from the agrarian ministry. We were told that you should fill this form and send directly to that authorities in Poland, and they will react immediately. Next day, that port was already in the list. And this is the example of the issue of challenges and which need immediate reaction, and reaction is here. I cannot say that everything is absolutely great. No, there are a lot of problems, but what I want to share, that there is a goodwill from the government side to change the system, to make it more flexible, to allow Ukrainian players, private sectors, international players, financial institutions to come to Ukraine to renovate the economy. Because this is the terrible situation that we have now in Ukraine, and we need immediate reaction, immediate investment. We cannot wait like 10 years, 15 years until something will change organical way.
Thank you very much. Matt, there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm to come in with your own products, especially on the infrastructure side, and all companies are coming with their own strengths. So when we're looking at the transportation and logistical infrastructure, particularly on rails, do you think that Ukraine should align with European standards? How will U.S. companies be able, like Amstead, work within that system?
Well, as I said before, at least on the freight side, and at least for the existing system, and I agree with what Emily said, maybe someday, but it's going to take a long time for there to appear an east-west standard gauge corridor. But we would say that on the freight side, for freight rolling stock, which is what we know and what we do, Ukraine is better off with the North American AAR model than the European UIC model. It's just, we're a freight railroad there. You have a critical freight railroad. They have, by percentage, probably a larger passenger than us. And I think on passenger, going with the Europeans can make sense. They're the leaders. We're the leaders in freight. So that will be interesting. We have competitors in Europe who would want, I'm sure, to play, but if you're asking what we believe, both selfishly, of course, but really what we think the facts on the ground suggest is North America and our company and companies like ours are the more natural partners.
Okay. Thank you. So, audience, over to you now for questions. We have a couple of minutes. We have mics that will be passed around. Raise your hand really high and please identify yourself. We have one right here in the front. Please identify yourself and your organization, and here comes the mic.
Didn't work yesterday. I'm asking the same question as I asked yesterday. Well, now it's working. My name is David Rink. I'm the Senior Agricultural Advisor at USAID Ukraine. And I wanted to, Faith, you mentioned insurance, all right? And I asked a question yesterday about grain shipments. And the one thing, the cross-cutting issue that keeps coming up is the insurance that's holding a lot of things back on the private sector side and holding back progress in a lot of areas. And I wanted to get a sense from, since you guys are a panel of experts and I get asked this question all the time, there's a lot being talked about and done on the insurance front, and from subsidized, maybe what we have happening is a market failure in terms of the ability of the insurance sector to underwrite risk, because the risk is so high. You can get the insurance, but the cost of it is so high that it's not commercially viable. What are the best, what things do you see happening? I know the Ukrainian government, in terms of maritime risk, has put up some initiatives for war risk on shipping. With relation to shipping, some of the development finance institutes have talked about potentially addressing security, guarantee funds that could help to lower the premiums. What do you see as the most likely and the most practical solutions you see in play now, and what is your sense of what needs to happen to get the insurance moving, assuming that the conflict is still going to be exerting influence on the rates?
Do you want to start?
I mean, I don't have a great answer for that. I think it's going to be a lot of work between multiple sectors. It's going to be private companies as well as government organizations having to work together to find some sort of joint solution. We are able to offer insurance for some of our customers. As you said, it is, obviously a little bit more expensive than you may be used to, but not always cost prohibitive to do that. We've also kind of seen just routing things in ways that avoid areas of conflict. Now, when you talk about grain, obviously that's not as viable for them. But, just again, I think it's going to just take a collaboration between the U.S. government, the Ukrainian government, as well as private corporations that work, in a way to underwrite these policies that can keep the cost low and also allow businesses to keep sending over to Ukraine, even if it is a war risk.
I'll jump in. I mean, I can't speak specific to project insurance, but I would say I do think we need to start rethinking risk in Ukraine. And I think that obviously the humanitarian disaster is real. The shock is extraordinary, especially to see this on the European continent. But the reality is that companies face risks all over the world and do business, right? We have a thriving business in Pakistan, which faces all kinds of risks. It has all kinds of problems with electricity, water, the same kinds of issues that we're talking about in Ukraine, and we overcome those. And I think there's support that the development finance institutions can provide on rethinking war risk versus other kinds of risk. I think that would be a good discussion to have. But I think it's also just on the business side of things. I think there is the front page news of Ukraine is deterring some investments that businesses might make in many places, especially when we look at the West, where there actually is the possibility to do it, and we've heard it here. There's a possibility to continue working and providing logistics and exporting.
Great.
Can I jump in? I also have a comment. If we talk about Black Sea, it's more complicated. But I want to share some example when the economical mechanism works better than any kind of insurance. And this is our case from the very beginning when we started seeking for companies who can send their wagons for Ukrainian grain transportation to the territory of Ukraine. Nobody wanted to send, not only because of the insurance issues or because of the safety issues, because of the procedure. They have leasing companies with them, and nobody wanted to start. But when the first company, and it was a government-owned company, for them it's much easier because they made a decision on the different level, and they have a different risk management system. So when that company started sending wagons to the territory of Ukraine, and we were trying to explain them that this is just 4 miles from the border, so everything is safe, but it's most about procedures, not about their willing to send wagons. So when the first company started to send wagons to Ukraine, other companies came because they didn't want to miss this spike. So they stepped in and they started sending their wagons as well, no matter the risk, because they're a private company. They want to make money. And this is one solution. We cannot implement that case for Black Sea because it's more complicated. But it could be one of the solutions.
Wonderful, thank you. So we are at time, and of course, if you have more questions, I'm sure if our panelists are amenable, can answer after this is done. But we will be serving, I think I see lunch out there, or at least people congregating, so I definitely don't want to go in the way of that. So can you please join me in thanking our panelists today?
Thank you, sir.